This has been a very productive week in the Bitshares development. We've been actively pushing toward a delegated proof of stake implementation that is more than just accounting, but actually the delegates end up signing off on blocks. And I got a large part of that core infrastructure in place. But it's also resulted in some significant changes because we ran into some little details that they always get you in the end. It's the little things. These changes are going to have relatively far-reaching implications for what we're doing, and most of them incredibly good. So first, this is going to get a little technical, so I apologize for those in the audience that aren't quite so technical. I'll try to explain what we're doing and why we're doing it in a clear and concise way as possible. If you're familiar with Bitcoin, it uses a transaction model where you've got inputs and outputs, and everything is linked together. So in order to make a transaction, you find some balances from some unspent outputs, and you bring them all into the transaction, and then you have to redirect them to new outputs. And so if you want to spend a fraction of a cent, you have to bring in a full input, send the fraction of a cent to someone, and then send the change back to yourself. And that's the transactional model of Bitcoin, and that was the transactional model of what we were doing with the Bitshares toolkit.
So that has to do, just real quick, with the Merkle trees and the hashing of all transactions into the root.
This has to do with how transactions are structured, how they relate to one another. So the transactions are the database. It's a giant linked, in concept, linked list of following the money from out of one place into another, all the way back in history to the Genesis block. Right. And that's how you prove that money was not double spent, and is the basis of the Bitcoin blockchain and a lot of the clones. And that works very well if all you are doing is managing account balances. But we're trying to do a lot more than just manage account balances. We've got to register names, pay delegates, track votes, make decisions based upon the sorting of those votes, and then we've got all these other things we want to do, like issuing your own assets, managing shorts, longs, bids, asks. A lot of these other systems are not, or other things that we're trying to track, don't really fall into the input-output transactional model. And so what you end up doing is having this side database, this state that is outside of any individual transaction. So I guess the easiest way to compare and contrast it with Bitcoin, all the information needed for a particular transaction can be had by knowing your inputs and the data in the transaction. And you don't need any other context. That's it. But with these new systems, not only do you need to know your inputs, you need to know, all right, is this transaction voting for a valid delegate? Is the transaction a valid bid or ask? If it's registering a name, is the name globally unique? All these things are data that are outside the transaction itself and outside its inputs and its outputs. So what I'm doing here is just trying to lay out the conceptual thing of what's going on and how there's this paradigm where we're attaching this global state onto these transactions. And I started realizing, and this is the main challenge I had, is I want to pay the delegates, and they end up getting these micropayments every time a block's reduced, because it's just a small portion of the transaction fees. And there's actually no way for them to efficiently spend it because of the way transaction fees work. They'd have a whole bunch of outputs, and the cost of spending it would be the majority or more than the amount of their payment, at least when the network's small and growing. The other area where we had a similar challenge is Bitshares X. We want to allow transaction fees to be paid in other, like BitUSD, BitGold, and things like that. So there needs to be all this other accounting and things going on outside of the input-output model of transactions. So what we're doing, and I created a branch in the GitHub repository for this, is we're switching the mental framework of the blockchain slightly in a way that is greatly simplifying and greatly more powerful. And it's almost so simple that you're like, why didn't we do this in the beginning? And I can give you the answer why I didn't do it in the beginning, because I thought about it. And under the proof of work systems of the past, there were some significant challenges with it. And so I ruled it out, and I didn't think about it anymore. So what we're doing is we're viewing the blockchain as just we have, imagine a giant database, and you want to modify this giant database. Well, the blockchain is just the log, the transactional log, the patches that you're applying to the blockchain. Perform this operation, do this operation, and it keeps the order. So if you want to roll it back, you can always reconstruct the state of the database by reapplying all of the transactions. That means that you can create a transaction now where some chains are starting to do this, where it's account-based. You transfer. I can send money out of one account to another account without actually having to specify a change address, because it just updates the database entries for the two accounts. And then you can make another transaction later, so it reduces the size of your transactions.
And this makes it more efficient.
Yes, it's more efficient because now I can define an operation that can modify an arbitrary number of records in the database without having to reference them all as inputs and create new outputs for all of those entries in the database.
Now, are there security implications for that?
The security is actually the reason why under proof of work I could not go with this model, and I was facing some challenges. And delegated proof of stake gives us a whole new option for lightweight clients. So let's consider this. One, all transactions have to be valid, and all nodes process all transactions and reach the same database state. So the security implications are the same. You can't spend a balance that's zero, or anything that would cause the balance to go negative. So that part is the same. But now we can have a transaction that says, I want to issue a new currency, and I'm going to issue it as this user ID. So you have an issuer. And so it's kind of like a relational database. And my user ID can also be a delegate ID, or it could just be my ID in the system, my alias. So there's a way that we can tie all these things together. And then if I need to make an update and a transaction is going to have some fees, say I issue an asset and someone creates a transaction and doesn't result in some fees, right? They didn't allocate all the funds. They took money out and didn't put it someplace. I now can track that unspent balance of the transaction as accumulated fees. So I can have this database where for every asset, whether it's the core shares in the network or BitUSD or someone's personal IOUs that they're tracking, or say a made safe IPO, they can all be tracked and monitored and updated as a result of the continuing regular transactions. And this is going into a lot of concepts, but the key thing I want to address here is that it boils down to this. The global state is just a database of records. You've got your various tables. You've got your name or identity table. You've got your asset table, and you've got your account balances table. And then you build some indexes on it. And the operations in the transactions perform updates on those tables, and they then they can be arbitrarily complex. One transaction can touch many different tables. But the key thing is this: I can then easily capture the changes to the database and undo and redo as necessary to handle forks in a transparent and extensible manner. And that was where I was facing some challenges, because if you have a transaction that's going to modify a delegate vote and simultaneously do a bid or an ask, and all these things are going on, and there is a chain fork for whatever reason, and you need to reorganize the chain, how do you get that global database back into a known state? How do you undo things so you can back up to the fork point and start applying changes from there? And it ended up being a ton of custom undo logic that's not easily extensible, because any changes you make other places might end up impacting the state. So this really simplifies that down, and as a result, we've got a robust system for handling forks that we can then scale.
So what you're saying, what I'm gathering, and please tell me if I'm correct or where I am, is that you can actually roll things back and change things that have been, like if there's a hard fork, you can actually roll things back and not hurt fewer people in the process.
It's not so much about the hard fork, it's more about the network splits as a result of delegates going down, or cables being cut in the Atlantic, or maybe some attempted malicious attack. But what we were trying to resolve is what happens when, due to network issues, the delegates do not perform a consistent chain of nodes. And how do we handle all that? This is just standard fork management. It's more complicated than the Bitcoin sense, because Bitcoin, all right, we pop off the input outputs and then we reapply forward. But Bitcoin doesn't have this other global database with all these indexes and other full information that needs to be maintained and undone as a result of popping off these transactions. And so it was accounting and structure for undoing that was getting more difficult. And while you might be able to do it in this case or this case, it wasn't extensible or friendly for other DACs, whether it's the DNS stack or voting DAC or whatnot. And if we started to add features, it made it harder to maintain going forward, because, now I need to undo this additional thing. I need to make sure I update the delegate counts to undo the votes that you applied as a result of this transaction. And that then affects so many other things. And if in the process of managing these forks, there's a bug, it could be catastrophic. So whatever we do here needs to be very simple, easy to understand and follow, so that we have high confidence that it's done correctly.
So the main challenge is related to the fork reorg population block?
Right. This is all about handling forks and reorganization. It should actually simplify what you're doing, Hackfisher, with the lottery system, because now you can have a table that will track all these things, and you can use the same process to manage your undo and forks. And so I wanted to have a separate meeting with you and all the other developers, like Nikolai or Toast in the forum, to discuss the implications of this and how it affects the design moving forward. It's actually been, I recognize this and have implemented it since last Thursday, and it's gone incredibly quickly. and it makes it so much easier to write code, update, and have confidence that it's right. So we will need to talk. It's currently in a branch right now. This is not going to be changing the API from the perspective of being Bitcoin compatible, the RPC, or anyone doing the web interface work. That's not changing, but this is going to affect the DAC developers.
Can you maybe summarize that again?
All right, so the solution is a transaction is defined instead of a set of inputs and outputs as a set of arbitrary operations. And these operations perform reads and writes to a set of database tables. And so what changed fundamentally is the nature of a transaction. Yeah, it's not inputs, outputs, and summarize it, because that's too specific. If you're trying to do something more robust, trying to get to, say, an Ethereum style DAC, you need much more flexibility in what the meaning of a transaction is. So it's really, if you've done databases, if you think about a transactional database, you record a bunch of operations that you're going to play, and you apply them all at once, and they either apply or fail. And they have, they log all the changes they're about to apply, and then if the whole transaction passes, then it writes it into the database.
And if it fails, then it does.
If it fails, it rolls it back.
And that's what you've effectively done.
Yeah, so I just took the concept of a normal transactional database, applied it to a blockchain as far as controlling which transactions should be applied and how they get rolled back. And before I apply a change, I save off, well, what was the previous state of all these records you're about to overwrite? And that goes into my undo history. And I maintain enough undo history to handle any reasonable length forks. I don't expect there to be a lot of forks, but we need to be able to handle internet issues when they come up, and at least have a plan on how these things get resolved.
How many state changes are you going to be able to hold? Is it just going to be one, or are you going to have multiple snapshots over the course of time that, that maybe after like 100 snapshots, we know that everything's pretty much accepted, almost kind of like the block confirmations?
Just like a normal database, you can actually have a change on top of a change on top of a change and do partial rollbacks. So when I go to apply a block, I create one change set, and every time I go to apply a transaction, I create another change set, and I can just do a partial rollback and continue. And so I can look at the state at any time. Then, as far as block rollback, that's arbitrary. It's only limited by your space. So I'd probably put enough in there to handle what I consider any reasonable length rollback. And you could use some kind of heuristic for it, based upon, all right, how many delegates have missed their opportunity to produce a block instantly? All right, I'm going to keep more. And then if everyone's producing blocks and everyone's signed off on everything, then you say, all right, I guess I don't need to keep as much undo history because I've got signatures from all the delegates for however many days in a row. There's no possibility whatsoever of a fork at this point, and you can get rid of it.
So essentially, you could actually set it up so the network itself can assess the level of risk, all the delegates, and the delegates can then, based on that risk model they've assigned it at the time, they can expand that change state log, or they can make it smaller.
Right. The network has the ability to detect when a fork is in progress because half the delegates or a large number of delegates stop producing blocks. And when it detects this, it can alert the user, and it can start saving undo state until it has clearly and unambiguously been resolved which way it will go. The fork management algorithm here, I've documented some of it with Doxygen and on our website, is relatively straightforward. We have a much easier time than other chains because we know exactly what the block interval is going to be. We know that each delegate can only sign one block per time interval, so you don't have to consider a lot of things. And it makes it very easy to say, well, highest block number is the best chain. And actually, no, that's the case. So I'm really happy with where we are. The problem is easily understood and analyzed for being correct. The challenges I always had with the other systems, whether it's Bitcoin or Peercoin, is how do you know someone hasn't produced a longer chain? You could have 3 or 4 chains going on in secret, and then bam, out of nowhere, here it is. What do we do with it? That's not really possible under delegated proof of stake. You can only have competing chains to the extent that a delegate failed to produce a block at the specified time. But because the expected delegates can't change that much by a single block, if one delegate says, I'm going to try to create a fork, no one's going to build off of his fork. And it's not like there's anyone else that can come along and extend his fork. So the only way to get a fork is actually having a network split of some kind. And so it's very easy to characterize the fork. You know, in theory, how many parallel forks you can have at a given time. And I'm very pleased with it. So we've been discussing it a lot, analyzing the corner cases. One of the things we posted as a refinement to the delegated proof of stake concept is that we're going to have an odd number of delegates. And the purpose of that is that in the case of the corner case where the network is perfectly split 50-50, that can't happen. One chain or the other is going to be longer because it's odd. And just that one little difference is enough to handle some of those corner cases.
So it sounds like a lot has happened in the past week. You guys have come to some necessary conclusions. Now, with regard to the test client and everything, how does that change the testnet, BTS XT?
The testnet was wonderful. It identified a lot of the challenges. One of the things that I got from the test network was that I was completely deluded to think that a trustee model with a single trustee was a viable way to even get started. If I'm not around, the network stalls. And if something happens and there's a problem, the client crashes or whatnot, the network stalls. The other thing I learned from it is, the problems people are having with their wallets. I was storing it as a flat file, and I was taking all the things to write out the wallet every single time into a temp file and move it in there, trying to make sure that was as robust and secure as possible. But the problem is there's either all or nothing. If anything went wrong when you were saving your wallet or anything got corrupted, you could lose everything in your wallet. And that is not something that we want. So this week we also moved the wallet to be a database so that we can update just the part of the wallet that's changing instead of having to go through and risk all of your wallet with every write to the wallet.
So your wallet itself becomes partially one of the store's actual change states?
No, it's not stored in the blockchain databases, but it's just using a database library to manage it. Bitcoin uses Berkeley DB to manage their wallet file. It just gives us more flexibility without having to worry about. What I wanted to do is, all right, every time you create a new key, you save the wallet so that if your client crashes, you don't lose the key you just created, or these things. But if you have to save the entire wallet and you start doing lots of operations, that starts to be a problem. So switch it to a database. Bitcoin had a database. I was trying to take a shortcut and just define a JSON object, load and store it, and encrypt it. But so we switched that over to a database with individual records in it. We keep trying to release these minimal viable products that try to take a shortcut. Like, all right, well, we're going to launch it with delegated proof of stake, where we're only going to track the delegate votes. We're not going to actually implement all the delegate handling and have the delegates sign off on blocks. And what I'm realizing as a result of watching the test, watching the things that happened, is those shortcuts could result in a chain that we have to maintain that is insufficient. We have to work through all the details with the delegates, like how do the delegates get paid? so that we have it right. It's not just a matter of turning it on. If we're going to have to do a hard fork of Bitshares XT to address some of these issues, I'd rather avoid that, particularly if it's looking like it's going to have to happen on a shorter time horizon for what we're doing. So I think what we're concluding is that we want to have a more robust, complete system out the gate than a halfway completed system that then we have to support and then slows down real development, right? Because as soon as we launch a system, whether it's whatever the system is, we're committed to supporting that system. And any bugs or problems or user issues we have as a result of releasing a system too early ends up actually hurting forward progress, whereas we'd be better off fixing as many things as possible before we launch. And so that's what I'm learning from every time we release these tests. I start to see all the little issues people are having and recognizing that it's probably a bad idea to try to launch something more official. As Dan Notstein's always telling me, yeah, you can release early, but the bugs don't go away just because you released. You still have to pay the price and you still have to solve all the problems. You're just changing the effects from, oh, you're late to, oh, I lost my money, or you compromised my private key, or something else. And then in the meantime, you're slowing down because now you're having to handle user requests and support requests, and you're in panic mode instead of carefully thought out developer mode.
This brings up a good point. And it's very interesting to see because there are some of these projects that have released, right? And they're going to, like, it sounds like Dan is a good person to have around for you. If there are bugs or issues, it makes it very easy due to the nature of the open source project that somebody could just come out with their own fork and fix those bugs before you ever notice it, have a superior project or product, and kind of cut out the founding people in the original, right? So that would be a potential danger to releasing something before it's ready.
Yeah, there are a lot of challenges with releasing before it's ready. It's incredibly tempting, and I don't like having people breathing down my neck, and recognizing that, hey, we are doing major design updates and enhancements, and it's iteratively getting closer and closer to the proper complete solution. And no one wants this done faster than we do, but I look at these other projects and they're getting stuff done, and I commend like the next guys. They've got their client out there, and they got a lot of things implemented, and that's relatively exciting. But then you look at the pace of Bitcoin development and the rate at which they're adding new things to Bitcoin, and you realize that these changes take a lot of time.
Well, does anybody have any questions regarding that?
So I like the approach. I think it absolutely makes sense to take into account all the interrelated issues that might come up with the parts you not have developed yet, and how that might affect the whole system, just what you said. So with that said, how many, that's a funny question, how many parts do you think are there which hold the potential for other obstacles that could take more time, like a further delay, the release?
Well, the good news is every single thing that we do, we make these changes, and it delays the initial release, but it's ultimately bringing all the future releases are being brought in. So it's we're adding more features. So when we initially talked about, all right, let's release something back in middle of March, it wouldn't have had name registration. It wouldn't have had asset registration. It wouldn't have had a lot of these things. So we're increasing the feature set simultaneously, recognizing that releasing a product, like, oh, we're going to build a car, but we're not going to have a muffler on it and no suspension. Some things, if you just don't put those features in there, it's just not a complete product, and it's going to have problems. So we're pushing back the date, but we're also giving more for the same period of time. So I think that ultimately people having to wait longer to get something in their hands are going to get more in their hands at the time they get it. So as far as the heart of your question of what other things or unknown unknowns or haven't we considered? And I would say that the single biggest thing that has been plaguing me throughout the entire development process is the fork management. And how do you handle forks and resolve it? And I am super excited that the fork management issue is just about solved and will probably be tested in the coming weeks. So by the time we meet next Saturday, I hope to inform you guys that we've tested it. We've done simulated forks with delegates that were elected in our tests, and everything was solid. And once we have that, I feel so much better about releasing something, because now I know that we can handle the forks. A fork is something that would kill a chain if you don't have a plan for handling it. And that's why we had the trustee, because, you can't get a fork with a trustee. But then, of course, the trustee can fail. And in our test, for whatever reason, the trustee did crash and with a segmentation fault. And I don't know why it did that, but I want to make sure that trustees and the delegates now can automatically recover in the event of some bug like that. All right, fine, restart it, log it, and we'll try to figure out what caused it. These intermittent random failures are the hardest type to track down, especially in advance, because they work on all your unit tests and all your short-term tests. It's the long-term endurance tests that seem to be the problem. But Dan Notestein and Eric Frias are working to put together a unit test framework with. You've probably seen some of the graphs on the network. Have you guys seen those where we've shown how the network's structured, how messages are propagating across the peer-to-peer network?
That was something that did Toast put that first up on the forums?
I asked Dan Notestein to post the graph.
Roger. I have seen that one. I also saw one. It seemed like it was more interactive. It was like a web-based one.
I have two more questions, real specific ones that might be not as easily and specific to answer. But with all that said and all with all those new updates, what roughly is the timeline for the release? That's the first question. And the second question is, like you said, you will have enough. You will have a lot more features ready at the release. Does that mean that other DAGs than Bitshares X, like DNS, Me Anyway, Music, and all those, can be released real quick after the Bitshares X release?
Yes, the other ones will be a lot closer. For example, I have the code in there now to issue your own custom assets in addition to just the straight up assets that are on there. The complexities associated with implementing the market for the bid and ask are much easier now. The ability to handle fees paid in alternative currencies like BitUSD, BitGold, that's a lot easier to implement with these architectural changes. So, when I'm making these changes, I'm looking at, all of them. So every DAC now has a name registration system. Every DAC is gaining a lot of abilities that they didn't have before. So it's really enhancing things. One of the other things we have going on in parallel to all of this is we got 3 guys working on a web interface, and that web interface is coming along rapidly. I would really like to launch with a working web interface that people can use. And I think that that's something we're going to have at launch, whereas all prior launches, we were saying that we're going to launch without such a web interface.
Now, with regard to this web interface, and are you going to have something on the wiki so people can actually go out and if they want to make their own custom modifications, it's more easy. It's easy for them to find exactly where they need to go, like a central hub rather than maybe just the forums.
Their own custom modifications to the web interface?
Yeah.
Yeah, there's It's just an HTML on your local computer.
So they can literally use like Google's inspect element to grab all the information.
Yeah, they can just point right at the directory. It's all JavaScript and HTML.
Is it possible to give a time frame within which Bitshares X and Bitshares Me, which I assume will come out at the same time? Is that correct? So a timeline or a time frame for the release of Bitshares X and Bitshares Me, and roughly when will Lotto and DNS come out, or is that not the right question to ask you? And we should ask Toast and Hackfish instead.
Well, Toast and Hackfish are responsible for their own release schedule, and of course, they're having to respond to my own changes. I can tell you that a lot of our developers are going to be coming online. They're finishing up school, ready to start working full time in June. So just a couple weeks. Our development effort, the number of developers working on this is going to grow by like 50% or something. Because Nikolai or Toast is going to be full time on it, and right now he's just working while at school. He's been very productive while he's at school, but he told me he doesn't want to release anything or do anything until he's on it full time. Hackfisher, he's on here, so I'll let him talk. But I believe he's planning on coming to Virginia to work with us for a couple months, and then he'll release after that. Based on where I see things right now, I would expect a lot of these things will be out this summer, with some things coming in earlier in the summer and some things later. But of course, I don't want to remind everyone that making our best estimates of where things are and engineering decisions are going to drive this, not release dates. It's really a balancing act between time to market, feature set, and being good enough, and also looking at the long-term costs of releasing something early. So that we have to balance all of these things. And I just want to make it one thing clear, is that I am aware of trying to avoid engineering perfection and therefore never release anything. I don't want to go down that route, but Dan Notestein is a very experienced guy who's run a software company for a long period of time, and I have a lot of confidence of the people we have on our team that we'll be able to get a solid product out there, and that we will be able to balance, identify what things need to be done before launch and what things can be done after launch, and get that out there as soon as possible with the right mix. And we're just doing our best. I said earlier, I'm not perfect, and I try my best to make the best call for this technology, and all the design changes or delays or anything that we do is just my best effort, and that's the only thing I can offer.
So you're not sitting there drinking champagne and in the hot tub?
Yeah, I'm taking all the AGS funds and just partying up. That's what I'm doing. Not actually writing code.
I asked that before, 2 weeks ago or something, whether Bitshares Me will come out first or Bitshares X, and I got an answer, but I think I got two answers, and they were contradictory. So maybe they can be answered.
Bitshares Me will come out first because Bitshares Me is a subset of Bitshares X. Okay,
and how long roughly will Bitshares X come out after that?
I suspect that the delta development time, the amount of development time required to implement Bitshares X on top of the new architecture is going to be relatively small. So I would not expect we had all these months where we've been working on the core foundation of these DACs, and that's where all the effort is going into. Once you have the core foundation, the amount of effort it takes to create a new DAC is insignificant. I'd say it's 10% or less of the development effort. I think most of the Bitshares X effort is actually going to be on the user interface side, creating the charts and the market viewing things. But once I have Bitshares Me, I've already implemented the bid ask solution once, and we are actually testing. I don't know if you guys remember back in January, I had a proof of concept going where you could place your bids, ask, you could issue BitUSD and everything. And at that time, that proof of concept was looking very solid. And then we identified some security issues with the market, and I needed to add additional checks. And there were some feature requests that people put in at that time. So, but my point is that I've already demonstrated that the algorithm required for issuing the assets and doing the bids, asks, shorts, longs, and margin calls doesn't take very long to develop. I think I put that together in a week or two back then, and I would expect that it would only take a week or two to implement the blockchain mechanics, and then everything else is just the web interface.
Does anybody have anything else, or should we look at moving toward closing this?
I just want to encourage everyone to check out the Bitshares X status update 2.0 thread. I posted a link in there. Sometimes it helps to actually have a visual of the network that we are putting together and all the things we're tracking. And we have a really snazzy graph that Eric put together. This is from actual network tests. When we're debugging these things, we need to have insight into what the network topology is, how messages are flowing. That's more than just analyzing log messages, and it becomes incredibly complex. So if you want to get an idea of the level of engineering that we're doing and the analysis and just the complexity of the system, just go look at some of the graphs we have on here where we show network propagation of a transaction, which nodes it went to when, and the timing associated with it, as well as the interconnectedness of the peer-to-peer network. The fact that those graphs exist, and you can see that we've got a robust system in place there. We've made a lot of progress.
With regard to that, I will ask one question. A while back, you said that you were speaking with Virginia Tech regarding some potential partnerships. I don't know where that's gone. I guess that would be the first question. And the second question that would fall in line with that, depending on your answer, would be, are the Invictus folks looking at keeping all this, archiving all this information for future courses if you guys were going to actually go that route?
Well, last night I attended the RBTC Tech Night, which is a conference here in Roanoke for all the technology companies in this area, and that's an organization I got involved with because of my partnership with Virginia Tech. So things are happening there. I've got a meeting, I've had several calls with them. I've got a meeting where I'm going to teach about 12 faculty at Tech, give them an introduction to the space and, everything they need to know to get involved. So that's being scheduled. We're working with all the businesses and stuff in this area to try to make that happen. But these things just take time to develop because you're dealing with large bureaucracies.
Sure. And if you were to go this route, is it possible to record your courses and put them online as well to kind of reach out to a broader audience? Or is that, like you said, you're dealing with bureaucracies? Is that something that's kind of a no-go with them?
Oh, I'm pretty sure they'd let me do whatever we want to do as far as recording things, or if we produce any course material. I plan on making everything I do open source and available. I'm really just trying to help them get into the cryptocurrency space and compete with people like MIT and others that are starting to recognize that they should probably be in the cryptocurrency space.
Agreed. And with regard to the education platforms, it seems like open source education is becoming the thing, especially with some of the driving factors like college tuition being $100,000, and some of the student loan issues that come along with it. It would be a very, in my eyes, intelligent move and strategic move to move in that direction. So it's good to hear.
I would like to, we can go a little bit longer today. I know you were only planning on 1 hour, but if it's okay with you, I'd like to address a few other topics.
No problem. If you hear my wife come in and throw me out the window, just keep talking.
So there's been some discussion on the forum about BitHoss and Truthcoin and our ability to partner with others to get things done. And I was curious what your thoughts were on that, and how we could better communicate to the community that yes, we are trying to work with everyone and make all this stuff happen because we want to see it all out.
For me, I know Beyond Bitcoin was kind of like it was something that kind of just happened like a spark. For me, BitHaus has been on here for a long time. They've been working with you guys as far as trying to build an infrastructure that would allow people to go into BTS directly with fiat, correct?
Yes, they're trying to build a fiat to crypto exchange.
And the last I checked, they're doing NXT. They're working with NXT trying to get something as far as merchant solutions employed.
Yeah, I haven't looked into great detail about what they're doing or not doing with NXT. I'm happy to see that they are doing something in the cryptocurrency space and that they are moving ahead with their business. That's a very good sign as far as I'm concerned.
Well, as far as I'm concerned as well, it seems like it would be very, I mean, you guys are opening up, you're going to have BitUSD, you're going to have BitYuan, you're going to have all of these different bit assets. Doesn't it seem to you that it might be possible eventually for people to actually go to the store and using BitHaus's technology, literally buy something based out of BitUSD, BitYuan? I could go over to China and buy things with BitUSD using my mobile wallet or something to that effect, or using whatever kiosk they have.
As far as I'm aware, they are managing your private keys, and they are just a centralized exchange. They are not a web wallet. So I'd like to address the concerns that people have that, well, they're not working with us now. They went to Next, and MadeSafe went with Mastercoin, and people just we can't work with anyone. And I think that those accusations are missing the big picture and also missing the obvious that we are indeed trying to and actively working with these various people
Well, it seems to me that the most important thing before you can really work with anybody is to have the foundation solid, and that's what you guys are working on right now, right? I mean, having the foundation of your technology where you want it and engineered the way you believe that it needs to be engineered, and then to move forward building on top of that would be something that you could look into after that point. Am I incorrect on this?
You're absolutely correct, and that's what we tell people is like, all right, yes, we want to work with you, but we can't work with you right now. And so these are, in some extent, it's a lost opportunity. We weren't ready in time to take advantage of one thing or another thing that came out, but these opportunities are going to continue to exist, and if we start to divide our focus to work with these people until, while we still are in the design phases and getting our foundation in place, they don't have anything to interface to. I mean, we're just now getting our RPC API out there, and so web developers are starting to be able to code to it. So, we're just now getting to the point that someone could, in theory, start trying to integrate with what we're doing.
I'll say this. I'm definitely personally not against anybody who would like to partner with you getting on here for a period of time to speak with you about it. Seems like a logical conclusion. I mean, we'd be able to set something aside every week, like a period of time for anybody who's working in the space to come on, ask you the questions they need to ask you without having to wait for a forum post to be answered, potentially lost on the forums and then answered, whenever you finally find it. It seems like this is a good medium for quick information exchange as opposed to without the potential loss.
Okay, can I say something to that? So in my opinion, like if you want to work together with someone, it's a personal thing, and you cannot come on to a public Mumble session and discuss the details and the issues you might have together in a public session. So you would have you would Skype. Daniel would have to Skype with the third party or chat with them in person. That's the one thing I think. And I can tell you what my I can just tell you what I know and what influenced my perspective. I also wrote on the forum, and that is so. The Truthcoin developer contacted me via Bitcoin Talk, and he said basically. He didn't directly say that, but in the end, he said he doesn't feel supported by Bitshares, and that therefore he is looking for another opportunity and so on. And with Bithorse, it's roughly the same. That they, like I said on the post, I just put it in there in the chat box here on Mumble. It's not about the material stuff that is coming out of the collaboration. Like, it's not about whether you are collaborating now. It's not whether the third party gets funded, but it's about whether the third party feels recognized and respected enough. And that's an emotional category. And that's the feeling I have with. I'm not so sure about Truthcoin because I didn't talk to them that much, but it's a feeling I have with Bithorse, and so do you? I try to explain it on the forum post.
All right, sorry. I appreciate what you're trying to say here. You're absolutely right that. To the extent that it's a interpersonal, relationship building thing, I'm trying my best to work with everyone, talk with everyone. The Truthcoin guys, we had a Skype call with them, and I wanted to keep working with those things with them to some extent. But obviously, I have to be judicious with my level of commitment, and. This is actually a area where I need to grow personally because I can be very blunt and not very the interpersonal relational things. You have to get to know me for a while to understand that my heart's in the right place and things. So it's really a challenge sometimes to handle things on the level that you're discussing here with the how people feel.
I greatly appreciate what you say, and I really am happy that you recognize the importance of the topic, and I think I also understand what you said, that it's an area for you to grow. And I try to explain that to Domsh, like Dominic, and I told him that that you, Daniel, you're having the right intentions, and you're a trustworthy person, but it's also the case that you sometimes can be blunt and can say things that are technically correct, but that kind of are received disrespectful, maybe, or like as the opposite of encouragement and as the opposite of a good basis to work again together on a personal basis and stuff. And like as an example, I gave that I sometimes write you a message and then you don't respond, and then I just write you another message and then you respond. For me, it's not a problem. But some people they take it more personal, and they think it's disrespectful, and then they Charles Charles Hoskinson, he does it the exact opposite, and I don't know about his intentions. I'm not judging people too fast on their intentions because I just don't know him, don't know them. But it's just a skill, it's a skill everyone can learn, kind of, and that's the right attitude towards it.
Well, I certainly would, when it comes to like partnering with other people and working to follow up on those relationships, I've tried to delegate a large amount of that to Gregory Wexler, because I know that when it comes to following, I'm trying to simultaneously be in the code, designing and organizing a development team, and handle everything, heads up, looking at all the different people that have things going on. And I could literally sit in phone call after phone call, day after day. And that's what Charles Hoskinson does. I worked with him for many months, I guess like 4 or 5 months. And he's literally on the phone all day, every day, talking to people, and making the sales pitch and getting people on board and saying all the encouraging things and promising them great things. And it's very effective and contagious. And the rate at which we were building partnerships when Charles was with us was incredible. And for that, I have not found someone who is as effective as Charles at doing those things. Unfortunately, there are reasons why he's not working with us anymore, and but that's still something that what you're doing here with this forum and bringing people in to discuss is a great thing for the community and for helping me in this area. But I really would like to get this so it's not about me. And people always want to come talk to me. I'm an idea guy. I will analyze and critique and enhance and anything I can come across. But when it comes to people, that's my weakness, and that's it's find someone who's got this strength like Charles has and get them doing that.
I'll come out and I'll say my thoughts here, and my thoughts were primarily one of the big things for bringing you on is to get people to want to come, to feel like they have access to somebody who knows a little bit about this stuff, who can help them guide them through the space and what's going on behind the scenes with Bitshares. That gives you the opportunity for that. It also gives the community, if they want it, to have the outlet where they can actually be part of it and feel like they're not just an outsider who has to pay to get into some conference to be part of it, where they can actually have access here. They can come together and they can form their own groups within the server and actually create their own meetups. So if Domsh wants to create his own meetup on the Beyond Bitcoin server, if Charles Hoskinson, even though you guys know, I am, if you think you're blunt, Bytemaster, anybody who knows me knows that I'm blunt, and whether I'm for good or ill. If people want to use the server, it's here for them to create their own meetups, to invite whom they wish, to gauge the community's interest, because generally speaking, what it comes down to is having community interest and buy-in, right? That's where the value is going to come from. You might have the best product on the planet, but if people don't feel like they have a stake in it and people don't feel like they're going to profit from it, or people don't feel like it's going to offer them anything in return as far as functionality or anything, then they're not going to come in. So for me, giving them the ability, I've talked to Domsh on a couple occasions. There for a long time, I was going to interview him with regard to some stuff, and I actually probably about a month and a half ago was the last time I messaged him. I never received a call back myself. I wrote it off. I didn't take it personally. I figured that he may have found something else, or maybe he just didn't have time, or maybe there was something that, things change so fast in this space. It's hard for you to expect somebody to, get back to you when they're extremely busy in the development side of things. So this is available for Bytemaster. If you want Brian to come on, if you want somebody else from Hack Fisher, you can come on and have a sit down with us. And Beyond Bitcoin, the community can go on and ask questions to you directly. You can come on and answer them directly. It's there for everybody. I'm trying really to not create this so I can become somebody who's a big name in this industry. I'm creating this because I saw this open hole where a lot of people, and I say it in the beginning of every one of these episodes, I'm going to read it off. It's there to lower the barriers of entry. And if you can lower those barriers of entry, there are going to be a few people who might be upset by you, Bytemaster, your bluntness. Some people might thrive off of it. So I always say, don't change yourself. If people don't like you or they disagree with you, and they really feel like you're that negative of an influence, they're not going to be there. There are going to be people who are going to surround themselves around you. Technology that you're creating, if that's sound, that's really what should matter, and everything else should form around it. Allow people to have low barriers of entry to use your product. Allow them to come on here. Allow legends to interview the ones that the community seems to have the most interest in, and allow the community to decide. That's my take.
Okay, so I agree with most of what you said, but I slightly disagree with the notion that only technology is necessary and everything else, the users and the community and the supporters and the connections will come as a result of it. I think that's not realistic. So what is also necessary, like we recognized already, is building relationships, like personal ones. And I like to add, with respect to BitHorse, that they are not disappointed or like being emotional about it or anything, but they just recognized the missing support, like they already stated on the forum, and they didn't finally close the deal with Bitshares. But I think some active encouragement and some active moving towards them and showing them that we want them and are ready to move towards them and make some compromises to the needs we have or to the interest we have. We are ready to do that because we would encourage. We would greatly encourage a collaboration with them. So such an active move would be necessary, I think. And that's the one thing. And the other, I have another question to add there.
Before you do that, can I hit on just one point you made, because this is very valid stuff, DeLillo. It's the question that I have is you said it's very important that we build these relationships, right? And you also said that between them that it should be something that would be like on a more of a private setting. But what I would question is, do you think that if you here's the benefit of the private setting to me. The benefit of the private setting is that you don't have to worry about other people being on here. You can say what you want to say. It's not going to be recorded. It's not going to be put out there. If you say something that's potentially offensive, or to be taken the wrong way. But on the other side, there's nothing from keeping us from inviting Domsh on here to talk to Bytemaster and have it out there and propagated amongst an audience that's going to see that. Because this is the potential problem I see. If everything is done behind the scenes, it leaves a lot of questions. And there are a lot of people who are fearful about this technology and what could come from it. A. B, not being able, having these things always in a private setting, which I'm not saying there isn't a place for that, but having it in a private setting only and not having it openly propagated and free open source for anybody, makes it more difficult, makes more barriers of entry to, perhaps say journalists who are just getting out of school. They might want to be a big journalist and they find crypto interesting, but they can't afford to get into conferences to cover the stuff. So they're running into this barrier to entry with lack of content that they can actually work with. But if they have, say they can go to the Beyond Bitcoin show where Legend's doing all these wonderful things, maybe one of these Beyond Bitcoin mumbles, if it gets a lot of hits, Legend can say, hey, I might reach out to these people and give them some more coverage. More journalists can then grab that information and repropagate it. You see, so it becomes a whole network effect. Whereas the private issue, it might have its place, but I'm fearful. I'm not necessarily fearful. I'm kind of concerned with the potential of just going one way or the other. You see what I'm saying? Like saying, oh, this is not the place for this. Why don't we try both?
I think there's different types of discussions that happen in different places, and you're right. We need both. Obviously, if we're going to talk about details of the deal or talk about technical stuff, with them, that can happen in private. If they want to come on here and talk, what they're doing, and we can discuss, all right, what value they're going to have. And this is what I always was discussing with Bitshares. All right, if you want funding from us, let's talk about how we get community support. Obviously, using AGS funds, we need to have buy-in, and we can ask some of the tough questions, because we were asking them some tough questions and trying to do due diligence for the best use of AGS funds. So yeah, that's the thing that we're trying to do, and those would be the type of discussions, particularly when you're talking about trying to crowdfund. At one point, they were thinking about crowdfunding a thing, and they wanted to create a DAC. So there's lots of different things. So I think it's a lot easier to collaborate with people when you have your product done, and you can say, all right, I've got my product. Let's talk about, and I can focus on all right, how can we bring you in and using our product? But it's all right, my product's a moving target, and as long as the product's a moving target, it's kind of hard to, tell people. And the challenge is I'd like to be extremely blunt and truthful of where we are, and so I feel very uncomfortable promising things that are not quite ready, or say that I'll be there, or that and so it causes uncertainty in relationships. Whereas salesmen will say, yes, we'll give you this in the moon at this date, and people feel really happy in the relationship until hopefully engineering will be able to pull it off.
Well, this is the thing for me. You're talking about AGS buy-in, right? The best way to get community buy-in is to give them, to say, hey, we're going to have this time that we're going to sit down and we're going to all talk about it as a community. If you want to be there, cool. If you don't want to be there, go and vote on the Beyond Bitcoin show under the thread that we'll set up. We'll link it to BTS. So you can either go to the BTS, the Bitshares subreddit, and click on it to go there, or you can go to directly there. Ask your questions if you can't attend. Have people in the community vote up and down on whether they want this stuff to be handed out or not. And the thing is, you're largely restricted by you're not willing to put at risk all of the AGS funds, because you realize that represents a lot of trust from the community. So you're hesitant to use those without the community buy-in. But right now, what is your way of getting the community buy-in? Right? Post something on the forum and have a bunch of people argue. You know what I'm saying? So you're going to have that to a certain degree here as well. But at the very least here, when information can move faster here than on a forum, you can have Domsh and them sit there and listen to what the community's potential concerns are, right? So that frees up a lot of problems for you and him on the development side, because as lead developers, you have to take so much into account at all times. And a lot of people have no clue how hard it is for you guys. For him, if he's listening to what the community's concerns are, he might be able to say, hey, let's sit down with the team these are the concerns. Let's revisit this issue later on. Let's try to find some of these problems and fix them, and then we can come back on and speak out again with regard to this, and we can move forward from there. Maybe if we can fix this, and this, which were the chief complaints, we can get more community buy-in, and eventually we can get it to the point where most of the community would really like the product that we're going to give them for what their AGS funds buy, right? And that takes a lot of the heat off of you, because really all you're supposed to do is produce the best product possible for what the people need and what the developers want to work with, and leave the rest of it to the community, which is generally what it seems like where the issue is, right?
Yeah. I think this discussion has covered the broad span of things. I mean, I think I'd like to wrap it up pretty quickly, but you're right. We want to accelerate the speed of communication. A lot of things that I expressed privately in our discussions with Haas could actually, should be addressed in a forum like this, because the always thing I always kept coming back to is, well, why should we use these funds to pay to develop a centralized exchange or pay for regulatory licenses when someone like we could partner with like a Cripsy or someone else who's already got a lot of that infrastructure done, and we can get more bang for our buck with partnering with someone like that. We want to partner with all these guys, but you need to have a business model that's self-sustaining and justifies its own funding. We're not this giant VC firm. We've got some money. We've got a lot to build with that money. If we hand all out to other people, we don't have anything to build our own stuff. So that's just some of the things we're thinking about as we're evaluating these things. And just so for the record, I am flooded with emails and requests for communication on a daily basis. I've got 920 unread emails, and that's just an example of how easy it is for something to fall through the cracks because there's just so much coming in. So if I don't respond to you, or if I'm slow, there's a couple times where I haven't paid tips out for things because I just haven't gotten around to it. It's not that I'm not don't want to pay or whatnot. So what I encourage people to do, and is exactly like what you're doing, is take initiative, set things up, and create your own businesses. Be an entrepreneur. I want to work with entrepreneurs who can figure out what to do and how they can fit in, and not require hand-holding. And that's, I think, the best way to build the strongest community forward is to do that. And if you see an area where I'm weak, step up and help fill that need. It'll help me, it'll help the community, and help everyone involved. And I think that we can do that.
All right. Well, with that said, I'll say that Beyond Bitcoin is available for everybody. This isn't me. I put it out there despite any of my personal feelings about any projects. It is there for you, even if you feel like it isn't. Please let me know. With that said, if you use this service, there's a very good chance that even if Bitshares doesn't pick you up, there's going to be somebody eventually who's going to listen to the content and might have a business or might know somebody who has a business that you will mesh with very well. This is the network effect. It takes a long time to get started. So people have this tendency to believe that after 1 month, 2 months, 6 months, that if it isn't Bitcoin, that it's not going to happen. But for a long time, we had years with Bitcoin being this little baby, and it still in many ways is a baby. You're going to have naysayers. You're going to have people who want things done yesterday, and it just doesn't work that way. Until it reaches the critical mass, you're not going to get that response. And if you don't have the patience to wait for that critical mass, it's never going to happen. So please use this. Contact myself, Delulo, LegendFace66 on Bitshares forum. We'll make it happen. We'll help you with whatever we can to get this stuff out there for you. It's free advertisement, guys. It's free advertisement. What else can you want, right? So use it. And with that said, I'm just going to go ahead and I'm going to read something off for the conclusion of this. It's from Donkey Pong. It was something I read on the forums and kind of laughed about it. And it says, it's under the topic, the Ides of May is coming. And let me go ahead and begin. And the master said to the student, go out into the world and seek ye the answer to this question. What is true of the definition of Ides? For when that question ye have answered, the truth ye shall know. That's easy, said the pupil. The Romans used Ides to refer to the middle of the month. Perhaps that is so, said the master. And yet you still believe there are 4 quarters in a year. Clearly you have some pavement to pound. There wasn't any door to hit him on the way out. Many moons hence, the student returned. I finally got it, he said. I know the answer to the question. Ides is the date by which the first half shall have ended. Oh, pretty good, said the master. How many quarters are there in a year? 5, the apprentice cringed, knowing it was simply a guess. 4 hadn't gotten him very far the last time. The problem with the Romans, said the master, is they didn't know the meaning of overtime. Nobody ever tossed the pigskin in the hippodrome. You are guessing there is more to life than meets the eye. On this score, you are correct. But you still do not know the true measure of the meaning, or the meaning of the true measure, if you catch my drift. Which you most assuredly do not. Hippo skin? The student went out again into the world. Months passed. He finally returned almost a year later. He looked like he had just had a vision, or maybe a pleasurable peak moment. Did you figure it out yet, son? The master asked. No, coach. I don't know how many quarters there are, but I found a more complete answer to the definition. The Ides is the date by which all other dates are measured. And because it is relative, nothing else is really fixed. The damn game can go on forever until there's a winner. The master clapped his hands together as he finished his pupil's sentence. And did you win? Of course, the student emptied his pocket. It was full of quarters which spilled out onto the ground. There looked to be many dollars worth of good coin. And how did you become such a winner? I ran an IPO for myself on Bitshares Me. My stock rose. Even as I paid back my investors, they won. But I was a winner too. Still, I haven't a clue how many quarters there are. I realized the time didn't matter nearly as much as getting it right. Plenty of quarters in a year. Plenty of fish in the sea. Effing genius, kid, said the master. Now help me up. He arose from his squat and grabbed up the quarters. I gotta take me a walk and stretch these legs. Arthritis is a real bitch. You sit down. You're the new master. So, with that said, please visit the the Beyond Bitcoin forums subreddit and the Bitshares forums. And we'll see you later.